In our next session, we'll try to dig a little bit deeper. Business leaders and political leaders have been announcing their net zero pathways, how they want to tackle the climate crisis. Corporate responsibility has been a buzzword for the last decades now. However, we face massive economic damage, even if we stop emissions right now. The Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research has done studies on that, and I'm happy and I'm curious to discuss on how both the business world and politicians can contribute to climate action and what tools can actually be used and improved to adapt to a changing climate. In the meantime, my next panel has taken their places up here on the stage. Let me briefly introduce them. I'll start with Anders Levermann, who is with the Potsdam Institute of Climate Impact Research, actually the head of the research department, Complexity Science, and before that you headed the department on sustainable solutions. Also, you're an advisor on climate change for political and economic stakeholders. Leonore Gewessler, of course, very well known. Should I even introduce her? You have your fans in the audience. Let me just add, you're not only Minister for Climate and Environment, but also for energy, mobility, innovation, and technology. On my left, seen from your point of view on the right, Klaus von Moltke. He's the managing director of the BMW Group at Steyr, and in Austria, of course, for those around the world. Steyr is a town in Austria, and the head of the Drive Machines BMW Group. You were born in Venezuela, have lived around the world, in Germany, in South Africa, and now in Austria, of course. And this is your applause. And last but not least, Omoyemi Akerele comes from Nigeria. You are the founder and CEO of the Lagos Fashion Week. You will talk about it later, but you have also done a lot to help accelerate the African creative community with an eye to sustainability, of course. We're very curious to find out more about you. Driving change, great power, great responsibility is the topic of this panel. I'd like to start with you. You have done a study with the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research about the economic impact that we face even when we cut emissions today. Can you summarize your findings, your studies?
Yeah, when people think about climate change and economics, they very often think about destruction. But whenever we destroy something by a hurricane, this is really a tragedy and something terrible, and it's also very costly, but only if you're in a poor country. If you're in a rich country, you generally rebuild that, and it's a positive signal in the GDP. That's a stupid thing, but it is. What we found is that unpredictable changes in weather have in the past affected the growth in GDP, and that is important because this growth will then, the damage that you cause by that will grow the next year and then the year after that and so on. And that's why the climate change related damages due to this disruption of the economic flows, not because of destruction, will be much more costly than we thought before. It'll be 6 times more costly than it would cost if we change our way to do energy and stay below 2 degrees.
Very interesting. Minister Gewessler, let me ask you, we've heard so much about the obstacles this morning, the obstacles that are in the way of climate change. How can we ensure a fast implementation of what we really want to achieve? What can we do, what need we do?
Everybody to take action, I think, and everybody to step up to the challenge. I had a long prepared input, but listening to today's debate, I'm already looking at the future. Today's debate, it reminded me a lot about pretty much exactly 5 years ago. I decided to go into politics. I decided to run for an election because I thought politics can make a difference. Policy matters. We need politics to deliver the political framework that we need to address the challenge that Mr. Levermann just described. I mean, this is a fundamental challenge to humankind. It's not just any other problem we need to solve. This is fundamental. And if we look back at the last 5 years, it has been an extreme privilege to be part of this journey with so many people who stepped up and who stood up. If you look at what happened in the European Union with the Green Deal in the last 5 years, we are changing the fundamentals of how this continent works towards a better future, towards more renewables, towards less pollution, more independence from autocrats and fossil fuels. We did heavy lifting in legislation in the last 5 years. If you look at Austria, the first months of this year, we managed to cover our electricity demand by 100% renewable production. So it's possible. It's possible if people step up and do their job. And so maybe I'm a bit emotional this week because it was an exceptional week. But we managed, a lot of people in the EU, to step up also this week in voting into law one of the landmark pieces of legislation we need to address climate adaptation and mitigation, the EU Nature Restoration Law, which will bring back which will breathe back a bit of life into nature, which we need so much to address climate change and to address climate adaptation and all these the challenges that you described. But we're not yet there. We're not yet there. We have so much more work to do, and we will only be able to do so if, from science to the business world to civil society to politics, people step up to the challenge and don't explain to each other why it's difficult to do things, but explain to each other how they are addressing the solutions.
Thank you. Klaus von Moltke, you are actually doing something. BMW in Steyr has been around for 40 years, more or less 40 years, basically in the past building combustion engines, but this is all changing. Tell us about it.
Yes, for sure. Now it's almost 45 years ago since BMW arrived to Steyr in Austria. Not many people know about it, but that's the reality. And since then, the team managed to transform this location and becoming the biggest center of excellence in driving machines of BMW Group, in terms of research and development as well, in terms of production. Actually, an interesting success. And just some facts and figures. We could actually say that every second BMW getting into the roads are powered by a driving machine produced here in Austria, in Steyr. But now it's time to move on. Now it's time to move on. A new generation of individual mobility has arrived, the electrical car. And we are shifting gears up to ensure we become leaders in this new technology. And BMW Group has chosen this facility with a major investment worth more than 1 billion euros for this task. It's a big change. It requires a complete new production facility. We're actually building a complete new facility next to the existing one. Tremendous task that we are moving ahead. And this is excellent for us. It will require a lot of time to get there because it's not simple, complete new technology. It will affect our own individuals working there. So it will not be a change of a flick of a switch. It will require years. But we are quite confident to get there. What really is more interesting as time moves on, and the electrical mobility will continue growing, our associates and employees will be relocated into this new facility. And this is a challenging leadership task, because we're talking people that will be doing something completely new and different. So communication and retraining. But I'm quite confident, because the people in Steyr have the right mindset, they have the greatest skills. And now we are going to use their experience to design and actually to manufacture the next generation of driving machines of the BMW. Thank you very much. But we have to, one thing that is very important is to understand, you can see this as well as a complicated task. We see it as an opportunity because it will help us to preserve the job of the 4,700 associates currently working at this facility. And we are not going to change only what we produce, we are also going to change on how we do things. Our new production facility is based on the criteria of our production strategy, so-called iFactory. What is also interesting to understand is that we will have a major focus on circularity and recyclability. And this is a very important topic for us, because circularity will also be part of our production business. Every material being used during production and generated out of the production will fulfill these criteria. And last but not least, because it has been also the discussion this morning, in terms of energy transformation, by latest end of this year, Plant Steyr will be supplied out of renewable energy. It's a big task, but we managed to do it by end of this year. That means that electricity as well as the heating will be generated out of 100% renewable sources.
Sounds like the best example.
I'm very proud to be the one leading this, but we have to keep in mind we need to continue moving on. That's why we need to be open for innovation, and this is the task that we have. So we're moving ahead, and this is just do it.
Let's do it. Omoyemi Akirela, founder of the Lagos Fashion Week. When you hear what you have been hearing this morning, first of all, tell us about the Lagos Fashion Week, and then also, what do you see as the most important steps for Africa or Nigeria in your case? It's on.
Hello. Oh, okay. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And it's been so inspiring listening to world leaders and everyone talk about be useful. So for us at Star House Files Lagos Fashion Week, we're a fashion business development agency, and we believe that fashion saves lives. Oftentimes, we all know that fashion is listed as the world's second largest polluter when it comes to climate change and the environment. But where I come from, we see the textile and apparel sector as a useful tool for the promotion of the sustainable development goals in different areas. When we think about this textile and apparel sector, we believe that when it's functioning effectively, it can contribute significantly to creating jobs, which is very vital in communities across Africa where the youth is we have about 60%, population-wise. Where we talk about unemployment, we think about the fact that unemployment rate is in the double digits. Yes, there are certain tools that's been sort of identified to sort of ensure that the textile and apparel sector globally can contribute to climate change and, to reduce the triple planetary crisis. But when we bring it back to home and look at Africa as a whole and realize that, when we talk about carbon emissions, I think we contribute less than between 4 and 5%. When we think about our carbon absorption rates through some of the carbon, basins that we have, like the Congo Basin, it helps us to sort of be able to put things into context, to take a deeper dive into the things that we already do and how we can sort of how we can double our efforts. So when you look at sustainable materials, for example, and the choices that creators and creatives make when they're designing, most of the time they don't have a choice. They're working with offcuts that's come from the European Union. Most of the time we're forced to deal with, secondhand goods importation that's come from across the European Union and it's come from across the global north. When we think about 15 million garments that come into countries like Ghana, double that in Uganda, and probably triple that in Nigeria, it helps you begin to understand, the sort of work that's important to do to ensure that the creative culture and creative industries in Africa really survive. Because you're desperately working with creators to innovate, to work with sustainable materials like, based from organic cotton, based on alternative materials which exist in so many quantities across the continent, from your bamboo to linen to pineapple, just like, different options. When we look at, the increasing drive to opt for renewable energy resources when it comes to manufacturing, from solar powered, hydro, and the list goes on. So it's very important to me at Star House Files Lagos Fashion Week to support creatives to understand that some of these words and some of these terms that come from amazing conferences like this, are a bit closer to home when it comes to their practice. Yes, they're already working in small batches. Yes, they're already working in a way that's transparent. Yes, our production or value chain is transparent to a large extent, which is why, our focus currently is on how to build innovation hubs to make some of these things a bit more easier and to be able to bring it closer to home. That, yes, we can do this. We're already doing this. And to understand in a deeper way how the textile and apparel sector can stop taking too much, especially when it comes to resource dependency. To a large extent, textile and apparel sector in Africa also relies on resources, human resources and craftsmanship from artisans that's been passed down from generation to generation. So oftentimes when I'm in a room like this and, rooms like this, and the question or the phrase African fashion comes to mind, people are expecting to see colors, but oftentimes a lot of designers have to rely on dead stock fabrics like this to be able to bring their work to life. So it's important that we're in rooms like this to emphasize the role that legislation plays, especially when it comes to EPR, especially when it comes to, legislation that's passed either through the Paris Accord or, and how the Africa Union can take some of this and bring it to practice. I also sit on the board of, on the advisory committee for the Sustainable Markets Initiative. So it's very important to also see how public and private partnership can contribute significantly to the change that we want to see and the role that textile and apparel sector plays in that.
Thank you so much. Sounds amazing. Mr. Leverman, let me get back to you. You are a scientist. Scientists have been warning a lot about the climate crisis, but sometimes you have the feeling scientists are talking, but the politicians are not listening. What can we do to make people listen to scientists who actually know what's going on?
Well, what we tried to explain better and better for decades, and it doesn't work. Even my friends, they know that climate is very important, but when I talk about Antarctica, they mix it up with the Arctic, which is on the other side of the globe. So it's a bit depressing for me, but it doesn't matter. The one thing that we need to convey is CO2, not the CO2 that we exhale, that just came out of a plant and was taken out of the atmosphere, but the CO2 that we generate by burning coal, oil, and gas will stay in the atmosphere for hundreds of years, which means, and that's very important, in order to stabilize the temperature of the planet, we have to go to zero emissions. That is something that is really a game changer. We learned this in 2009, and almost 15 years ago, and it is a game changer in the sense that no industry can hide away. There's no space below zero. But it also means, and I basically only talk to industry these days. For the last 15 years, I only talk to industry, hardly anyone else. And what I realize whenever I say zero, there's silence in the room for a moment, and they think, oh, we got the worst of them all. We always knew we had to reduce, but now we got the climate scientist who says 0, oh dear us. But then they realize after 30 seconds of thinking together that 0 is much better than reduction. You can't tell any stakeholder from industry to reduce because that's against their fundamental incentive. But to say 0 means we don't have to do less. It means we have to do things differently. And that it means innovation, and that is the point. We need to set up this strong barrier, and we've done so in the European Union. 2045, no more carbon emissions from oil, gas, and coal. And now we slowly guide industry towards this goal in order to facilitate the innovation and also the structural change that is necessary in order to get there. That's what we need, 0.
Thank you. Minister Gewessler, I'm seeing you taking notes. I'm sure you have a lot to say to what has been discussed here on stage. Let me kick you off with another question. A lot of people still talk about hoax, climate hoax. What do we do, what can we do to bring these people around?
Just one comment to Mr. Levermann.
Yeah.
I think you're doing very successful work because I think in politics it starts to sink in what 0 means, latest at the point when we will discuss our 2040 climate goals in the European Union. So I think this really starts to sink in. To your question, I think we should not, or we should first of all start by naming what's happening. Climate action has become part, excuse my language in this, of a cultural war that's fueled by certain interests, that's fueled by fossil fuel interests, that's fueled by parties who live off exaggerating problems, not presenting solutions, that's fueled by propaganda and disinformation about what solutions are really about. And in a certain kind of way, this is also not surprising. We are in the middle of transformational change. And transformational change, of course, there is fears involved. Our president pointed to that very clearly in the beginning. On the one hand, we like to embrace change. On the other hand, it's maybe a bit scary. But obviously, this transformational change means something for business models. Mr. van Molke just explained what it means to his business model. This is quite a fundamental change. And of course, there's resistance. And if you look at every big political change, every social movement, there is this point just when it's really tipping, where there's a lot of resistance, and that's where we are. And so what do we do to make sure we keep our societies on board? I think we need, I quote Maros now, to engage, and we need to engage, not in a way of how can we tag them along, but how can we empower people to be part of this transformation. So when I speak about, I also initiated a 1 million roof program in Austria. So I'm very happy to hear that now we're 42% there, 420,000 solar roofs in Austria. But what even excites me more, what even excites me a tiny bit more is that we have 2,000 energy communities in Austria. So that people in their neighborhoods came together, said, we're building this together, we're doing this together, we're distributing, consuming the electricity we produce together because we can have an impact. We are, as politicians, in an obligation not just to talk about leaving nobody behind in the transformation, but to actually deliver on leaving nobody behind in the transformation, nationally as well as internationally. We do have also the question of climate justice on a global level, not just on a national level, so excuse me for speaking to the national perspective exclusively almost today. So what did we do? We designed a policy that if people cannot afford to change their old heating system, fossil heating system, to a new heating system, the lower 30% of the income brackets become 100% funding for it. Because climate action cannot be a question of your purse and of your income. It has to be something for everybody. And so we are there to actually deliver action to that words. And I think, last point, we are at a crucial point in time. You mentioned it. It was mentioned several times. We have elections in the US. We just come out of a European election with a new commission forming. The worst thing we can do is in the middle of this now say, oh, maybe we back off, or maybe it's too much. Maybe we need a break. No. We need people who stay the course, even if the tailwind becomes stronger. We need to make sure that we deliver on the promise of the Green Deal, and so the worst thing we could do is stop halfway.
Thank you. You have moved away from the national.
I just said there would be an economic disaster.
We're moving back to the global perspective. You have already started moving away from the national perspective. And before I get back to you, I'd like to get to you and Africa in particular. Which tools are important for the African continent to work both for a healthy climate and social welfare? What needs to be done? Also, what do you expect from Europe and from the United States to do in that direction?
Thank you very much. I think increasingly across the continent, there's a need for consolidation. So when you think about carbon assets in particular and carbon pledges that governments have made, when you think about in terms of the contributions they want to make, what they want to increase. There's been increased efforts. I'm going to also refer to the Sustainable Markets Initiative and the work they're doing currently, to ensure that some of these carbon pledges are actually redeemed, because oftentimes this happens in different rooms, and to explore in a better way, how the public sector can work, the private sector can work with the public sector to ensure that this is done. Of course, there's also an increase in looking at climate financing or green financing, as they say, in that sense, to be able to invest in, things that are naturally investable. Because we find that oftentimes people raise funds first before they start to explore what needs to be focused on, especially when you think about infrastructure that's green across Africa. So yes, we do have so much in terms of agroforestry and all of that. It really does exist to a significant extent, but then we're lacking in a lot of areas as well. So how can we invest in our healthcare, sector using technology as a tool? In that sense, how do we further invest in our agriculture, when it comes to regenerative options, and focus on those climate-resistant sort of crops and use it to our advantage? How do we educate? Education is very important because we're coming at it from a completely different place, because we're thinking, it's our way of life, it's our way of being. You try to convince people about these things, they're like, we've been trying to conserve energy for so long, but you come to a country like Nigeria where we're still dependent on diesels, generators, we're still driving cars with petrol. I'm looking at BMW because I'm thinking, how to introduce alternative options. So in some ways, it looks like, we're really on top of our game because it's our way of being, but then you take a closer look and realize you're way behind. So a lot of education has to be done, and it brings me back to conversations around collaboration, between stakeholders and ensuring that, some of these conversations that happen at COP happen in great rooms like, we're here at the Austrian Summit, are targeted at ensuring that the key stakeholders that need to have these conversations are present in the room. Of course, finally as well, it's very important in addition to creating opportunities for infrastructural development that can support our focus on climate change, on our focus on, increasing our climate, reducing our carbon emissions. We also have to look at what we're doing in terms of, in Nigeria, for example, we have the zero non-oil movement, which is, the diversification of the economy from being totally oil dependent to other areas like agriculture. This is why I can be in the room talking about this, because I work in the textile and apparel sector, and realizing that culture and creative industries have a role to play when it comes to this, because I believe that culture is the ultimate renewable resource, so, and how can we use culture as a tool for sustainable development. And that's, why I like what I do a lot, because I believe that sustainable development goals, as important as they are, how can textile and apparel sector contribute to that? We're thinking about mindful consumption, mindful production. How do we empower youth? How do we create opportunities for women, in communities across the continent by providing opportunities for job and wealth creation, and the list goes on and on. So I think, but most importantly, it takes a lot of deliberate and mindful work on the part of, public stake, the public, which is the government, and the private institutions who can support that growth to be able to create more and more opportunities, not just for conversations to happen, but action. And this is already happening across the continent when we think about countries like Kenya, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Nigeria, where more and more people are ensuring that this happens. The Africa Union as well, through the Africa Renewable Energy Institute are doing quite a lot of work to ensure that conversations that happen globally, we're innovating around solutions to ensure that, we apply this. But beyond that, is to understand that our contributions might be below 5%, we're mindful of that. But how can we ensure that we use this to our advantage to build a bit more and invest in, those carbon, in those areas that sort of, ensure that the carbon emissions are low through our forestry and all of that. But most importantly, it is to work together.
Very important questions you're raising, very important points you're making. Let's move back to Europe. Let's move back to BMW. Looking into the future, how do you see the market developing? What do you expect from policymakers?
Concerning the development of the e-mobility sector, we all have come a long way. Mm-hmm. So we now grow continuously. We have made major investments, and actually we as BMW have a product placement which is quite strong. But we know that there's still a road ahead, and we might encounter the one or the other bumps on the road. And what is clear is our task as car manufacturer at the moment is focusing that we improve on a daily basis our product in terms of efficiency, but also on the way how we do things. But we have to be clear. Not all the customers are ready yet to do the change into the e-mobility. And the main reason that we see is the topic of infrastructure. Customers are not confident they are ready, that they are able to charge their vehicles when they need it, where they need it, and the duration required. And that's definitely one of the topics. And from the infrastructure point of view, we see different kind of developments around the world. So there are countries doing quite well. Actually, Austria is doing quite well, and we see it as well in terms of our sailing figures that actually here, e-mobility is really pushing quite hard. But there are some others that could be better. And that's a topic, and that's why we actually need to be, as an industry, we need to keep our eyes open, be technology open, also if the priority is the decarbonization of the mobility. That's very clear, the task. And yes, we have seen plenty of new competitors in the market, and this is a big challenge that we see. But I'm going to say something. I love competition. You know why? Because competition actually is the vital ingredient for innovation. And innovation will make sure that we make this world a better place. So therefore, we are quite confident. The bigger concern that we really have in terms of, and where we actually discuss continuously with the stakeholders in the politics, is the topic supply chain. For the production of the electrical cars, we require materials, and we are fully dependent because we source them from other parts of the world. And we have now seen an increased amount being sourced, and this will be just a portion of what will be required in the future. Therefore, we have to be very cautious and be very careful also as Europe that we don't create dependencies, especially in times like this, like in crisis and geopolitical conflicts. And this is where I want to make a call for sure that we, together, industry as well as politicians, focus on this topic.
Let me just say at this point, the governor is back here, and I believe you have an announcement to make.
Arnold, now I had the chance to explain here the audience what we're doing to transform. But I would like to invite you to our location in Steyr by end of September to come and take a look and experience it by yourself, explained by the employers. Are you there?
I will be there.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Is my mic on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, because I'm a big fan of BMW. I mean, I drove BMWs way back when I went to the United States. It was my first car. We talked about that. It was a little four-cylinder, the 1600 BMW. But in any case, the bottom line is that I'm so happy that now BMW is building electric cars. Finally, they got with the program. It took years and years and years of research that they were doing to be efficient, which we understand that they need to do research to be efficient, but now finally they do it. And of course, who did they come to for the first big commercial on the Super Bowl? Exactly. They came to me. And we put together a commercial for electric BMW, and it was #1 commercial of the whole Super Bowl. #1. They did a fantastic job. It was not just because of me or anything like this. It was a great ad agency that they used, the #1. #2, it was the best car. And they had me, good design, everything made it #1. So now I'm really looking forward to going to Steyr, to going to see that factory.
You're going to be amazed, and the people will be waiting for you, and the employees will explain it by themselves. So we're quite happy for it, very excited, and we are just going to do it.
I'll be back. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you to Hannelore.